On this episode, we're going to be talking about building your first Necromunda board from the perspective of all the different options.
Dome Runners TV, your guide to the Underhive and beyond.
Hey there, scabby scummers and gangers. Crimson Oracle here with another episode of Dome Runners TV. Today we are going to be talking about building your first battlefield. This is something that I've seen asked about a lot, and most recently I saw a thread on Reddit about it, and it made me think that while I've talked about terrain a bunch and done a bunch of tutorials for making cheap terrain, what I haven't really talked about is planning out your first board and what the kind of different approaches are. So I want to do an overview, and that's what we're going to do here.
If you like the show, don't forget to like and subscribe, and check out our Patreon. You can support the show for as little as $2 a month.
So when it comes to building your first Necromunda board, one of the first and most important questions is, how big of a board do you want to play on? So the answer varies greatly based off of your play group and your needs and your environment and all of those things. So we will say this: there's a minimum size of around, I would say, 2 feet by 2 feet. There's some play there. It doesn't have to be a perfect square in order to play. So you could play on a 22 by 30 kill team board, for example, as I've done many times, and have a perfectly wonderful game. But overall, you're going to mostly find people recommending 36 to 48 inches. 24 by 24 is very tight. You're not going to have as much variety. You're not going to have as much opportunities for sniping and all of that. But of course, the larger you go, the more terrain requirements you're going to have. So it is a balancing act. 48 by 48 inches is the recommended size in the book. But I think 36 by 36 is much easier to pack densely with terrain and doesn't really make the battle any less sort of fair. If anything, I find that it just gets you to the action faster. There is, of course, another option, which is to build modular tiles. In that situation, you can potentially have unusual shapes and setups. So, for example, on Halloween, I used my tile-based terrain in order to do a extended run through zombie-infested corridors. So rather than building it as a square, we built it as kind of a chain, a path that we could travel through. That's exactly the kind of thing that is possible when you have a more flexible option in the form of terrain tiles. So that's worth thinking about. We need to talk about the play surface. So, of course, you can play Necromunda on bare tabletop, but most people like to have some kind of a cover underneath their board in order to play on. Now, the absolute cheapest route you can go here is an old standard that the grognards know well, which is felt. You can just buy felt at the craft store for very cheap. You can get a very small amount of it and be perfectly fine to play on for ages. But of course, it is not perfect because it will be annoying. It'll pull up, it'll, fold, and you'll get wrinkles and all that stuff. Not to mention that it attracts all kinds of schmutz and dirt, and as a result, I generally don't recommend this. If you're going to do a homemade board, I think that the absolute, best starting point is this insulation foam that you can buy at the hardware store. Now, this is available readily in any hardware store in the US, but I hear in the UK and some other countries it is harder to find. So you might need to go to a specialty shop to get it. But we generally can get a a board that is 4 foot by 8 foot for around $25, and you can even often buy 24 by 24 sections that are pre-made if you want to just buy them one at a time. So this is a great solution. You're going to need to do something to the board to make it, playable on top, but you could do anything from detailing it with plasticard or even cardboard from a cereal box, etc. Or you can go more of a dirty, textured route and just cover everything in sand and flock in order to create, a base that you can paint over and use as sort of your play surface. Now, this is a very affordable option, but it is not the most user-friendly. Your board is fairly fragile. It can get knocked and bumped and scraped and damaged. It can break, and you will notice that your whatever you cover the surface with tends to separate from the foam because things don't adhere to foam all that well. So you will get bits of your terrain flaking off, but it's a very affordable way to start, and it allows you to do some work to kind of add details. So it's a good place to start your builds, but there is another option. You're going to spend more money on it, but it is absolutely no fuss and you can just play. And that, of course, is game mats. There are countless companies that make game mats. Personally, I'm a big fan of the mats that the people at Table War sell, and I also have a Frontline mat, and both are wonderful and come out whenever I need to set up a large board and don't want to use the cardstock GW boards, which, speaking of which, we're going to talk about now. If you don't go the game mat route, and game mats are a good investment, I think, but some people don't like them. One thing that you may have lying around, or that you may find yourself getting in various bundles when you start buying terrain, are the boards that Games Workshop uses for Kill Team and Warhammer 40k. Those are they're made of cardboard, and they are, they're actually surprisingly nice. The images on them are very nicely detailed. They are very easy to store and move around because they usually fit on a bookshelf. All qualities in their favor, but they are significantly less durable than either of the previous options. And if you buy just the two boards from GW as a bundle, they're expensive. They're like $60. But you may find that you will get these in various bundles that you purchase. Another thing that you might also find is that if you buy a Necromunda set, like Ash Waste or like the Hive War set, you will often get a little fold-out mat. These are small and are really meant for mostly just getting started playing, but they are a great basis for just that function, getting started. I don't necessarily recommend playing on them long term, as they are way less durable than even the cardboard boards that GW makes, but they are something that you may have lying around. And finally, of course, there's the most expensive route, which is to go for plastic tabletop surface, whether it's tiles or a Realm of Battle board. These are, they're an expensive choice. If you happen to be able to even find a Realm of Battle board, they are out of production as far as I know. And of course, there is the whole, issue of the weight and the clunkiness and all of that. So it's not always people's preferred option, but it is a excellent detailed surface for you to play with in terms of creating a very very deep and immersive environment. So if you want to go that route, it is definitely rewarding from a modeling standpoint, but you are going to spend more money. Let's talk about terrain itself. So obviously on a Necromunda board, you want to have a absolute glut of terrain. You want, various things blocking line of sight. You want things that are going to offer cover. You want railings. You want walkways between buildings. You want verticality. You want the ability to kind of traverse, tight, narrow spaces. All of these things are rewarding when you put that effort into creating them in your Necromunda board. It'll create a more dynamic battlefield. You'll get more cinematic moments. I assure you it's well worth it. So the cheapest way to start is, of course, homemade terrain using various household materials and using supplies that you can get at the craft store or the hardware store. Here we're talking about soda cans and soup cans and cardboard from trash that you're throwing out, and all the various kinds of stuff that winds up going out your house to recycling or what have you. These things can be held on to, and I've done a whole series on various ways to convert these terrain, and I will be continuing that series. So there are tons of options for that. Your main costs here are going to be things like glue, sand, flock, sanded grout, foam core in order to build structures, plasticard from yard sale signs, which you can also get at the hardware. That's a great way to get a nice rigid, very strong surface that's going to hold up better than cardboard will. But of course, you will have to invest a lot of time and effort into making this stuff look good. You can make it look passable fairly quickly, but doing a lot of detail will wind up taking a lot of time. So it's worth considering that, whether your time is a resource that you have a lot of, or whether time is a constrained resource and you have more money, then it might be a good idea to spend up. And now I should say that none of these methods of creating terrain are mutually exclusive. You don't have to do just one. So you could, for example, build a bunch of homemade line of sight blocking ground level terrain and then purchase buildings that will go over and around the terrain that is made of a different material. And with that, it's time to talk about MDF. Now, MDF is a great material for terrain. It is flat packable, it's affordable. You can get large quantities of coverage on a table for a very reasonable amount of money. And it's gonna go way farther as long as you're buying bundles than you're going to get out of a plastic Games Workshop scenery pack. So this is sort of the middle ground option. You are going to get, more bang for your buck, but the downside is that these boards have less detail. Now, you will find that some of the artists who designed the MDF terrain have burned in details or have designed slot in details, and these are a great way to break up the sort of flat nature of MDF terrain, but a lot of what it takes to get MDF looking good will come down to how you handle it when you are building and when you are painting. MDF terrain can be enhanced with the same materials that you will find useful for working on household projects, things like sanded grout and plasticard and all of that. You can do greebling to add detail and break up spaces. And of course, a lot of it will come down to how you paint it. Now I'm going to do some videos on painting MDF terrain in the future, but of course I need to purchase some more, as all the MDF terrain that I have is painted, so there's that. Now, there are a lot of MDF manufacturers out there because starting MDF manufacturing is as simple as buying a laser cutter, which you can put in your home garage. Personally, I am a big fan of Prometheum Forge. That is my sort of go-to. Prometheum Forge is cool because they have a variety of terrain sets. For example, their can terrain allows you to build a very large amount of terrain for a reasonable amount of money, and the only input is various soda cans that you would be throwing away anyway. So this is a great system for getting a big battlefield on the board as cheaply as possible. I am also a big fan of their bulkhead system. This is my go-to for 3D boards. It is very portable. Everything fits down into these two little boxes, and then you are good to go. You can bring it out, set it all up. Even the boxes themselves can be used as buildings. It's a quite brilliant system, and I just swear by it. So definitely check that out. Now, another manufacturer I really like is Death Ray Designs. They do a modular system called Deadbolt's Derelict that I really like, that I use with my Necromunda tiles from Underhive, the cardboard tiles. Those are a great way to have, more depth and cinematic environment on those boards, which would otherwise be completely empty. And then there are their other lines. They have a great one that is for Infinity that's very over the top and kind of neon and a little not 40k aesthetically, but that can be fun for throwing in a little bit of variety. And of course they did a set that was similar to the Sector Mechanicus terrain, which is a really good value and I use for some of the tables at the Nova Open. Now, there are, of course, many other manufacturers. You may find that they are more affordable, but I recommend reading the reviews and looking into the people you're buying from, because at times there are manufacturers who cheap out on the materials, and you find that the MDF that they're using is too thin and doesn't work properly. And so just make sure you're doing your research when you're shopping around. I can swear by Promethean Forge and Death Ray because I've built a ton of their terrain and I think it is awesome, and they have not paid me in any way to say that. I've been a fan of both of those companies for a long time, and I use both of their stuff on a regular basis. The world of plastic terrain. Now, there is a ton of options for plastic terrain, and in my opinion, it's never been a better time to get into plastic gaming terrain. So, first of all, you've got Games Workshop. They're the 800-pound gorilla when it comes to anything injection molded plastic. They offer a variety of kill zones for the Kill Team game that will give you both a 22 by 30 board and a bunch of terrain to go on top of it. These are often the most affordable way to get started with plastic terrain. Of course, the starter set for Necromunda Hive War comes with some plastic terrain. The Ash Waste set comes with some plastic terrain. So if you are using one of those to get into the game, you already have some plastic terrain to start with. Building upon it is also very easy. Many of the lines are designed to work with each other, and that's just the kind of quality that you get out of spending up. So, you are getting what you paid for. There are also less expensive options in the plastic terrain world. For example, there's Pegasus Hobbies, there is Mantic Games, and I'm sure that there's many others. It is a great way to, get a variety of cool stuff, is to shop around and go with other manufacturers' stuff too. Because remember, the hives were built and rebuilt and rebuilt and rebuilt over the course of 10,000 years, more actually, because I think the hives were built by the Iron Lords, so it even predates the Great Crusade and the conquest of Necromunda. So, this is a great opportunity to kind of add more interesting things into your table. So I recommend checking things out. Personally, I don't love Mantic's terrain. I have a little bit of it and I was not super impressed by it, but it is cheaper than Games Workshop generally, and you do still have that same sort of high detail choice, which is great to have. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the option of the new Zone Mortalis-esque terrain set that is coming out with Arcs of Omen. This set is going to have 2 sets of the walls from the Gallo Dark and 2 boards to play on. We don't yet know what the price will be, but I am guessing it will probably be in the $200 to $220 range. If it is in that price range, it is going to be a great way to get yourself a fully playable set that you can start gaming on immediately. 44 by 30 is perfect size. The small rooms with lots and lots of corridors and all of that is perfect for playing on. It is, in my opinion, some of the best Zone Mortalis terrain that they have ever done, because of how compact it is, but it is also going to limit you, the way that it's designed around one story. So you're really just building, a single level. So a lot of people like to mix it up and play a mixture of Zone Mortalis and Sector Mechanicus games. So you may find yourself wanting to have a board of each, and if so, this will be a great way to go. Alright, so of course there is one thing that I haven't mentioned yet that is a more complicated topic that, I think has been addressed in various platforms by both me and many other people. But there is, of course, 3D printing. When it comes to getting started, 3D printers are generally not ideal. They take a lot of tweaking when they are, generally speaking, on the cheap end to get working properly and stay working properly, which you will need if you're going to print enough terrain in order to play on. You're also going to have to purchase materials and purchase STL files if you are going that route. So it's a option, but it is going to have one of the higher barriers to entry to get into it. In general, 3D printers are more of an advanced option. I think you need to be ready to take on a lot of scale in order to justify using a 3D printer as the way to get into building terrain. So for under $50, it's very doable to get yourself some terrain. But if you want to invest less effort and time into scavenging and building, you will probably be able to get an MDF set for around $100, $150. And then, of course, a mat to play on is right around the $50 to $60 range. So that's $200 for the MDF, and that will give you a very, very dense board. Now, the Kill Team kill zones clock in at a bit over $100. These are going to be a good choice for a bundle of terrain, but your options are fairly limited and you're not going to cover as much verticality or space as you would if you were purchasing MDF. And of course, there are some battle zones in the $200 range that will give you closer to a full battlefield with boards to play on, which is great. But again, you're going to get less overall terrain than if you were to purchase. And as always, thank you to my patrons. You guys help keep this show on the air. For as little as $2 a month, you can help support the show. It is easy, it is cheap, and it makes me feel good every time someone subscribes. So, you're also doing some good in that way. Don't forget to check out the podcast. I have new episodes coming up in the near future, so don't forget to subscribe to that on iTunes, Google Play, wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, etc. Just search for the Dome Runners. And finally, of course, as always, everybody stay safe and don't forget to change your paint water.